In the Methodist Church, if you're seeking to be ordained to make this lifelong commitment to service to the church, it's a process. It takes multiple interviews over years, and that's as it should be. That's our method. Uh, and Two people I know who are looking to take the next step in the ordination process, their next step, attempted to do so this last month, and were told no. Not this year. Not no, you don't have a job, but no, not this year. You can try to take this step next year. They're both still serving churches, and I have full confidence in them that next year it will play out differently, but it's still a hard thing to take that type of hit, to be in the process of ordination and expect to take that next step forward and be told, no, not yet. I've talked to these two friends, and I've listened and trying to understand what happened, why it happened, just taking the time to listen. They had a few things they wanted to say, and that's good, right? People in the midst of grief and frustration they often have a lot to say, and to have an ear is a gift to them. And though I have an inclination to try to solve problems, I know in such moments that in addition to listening, really the other thing that I can do is to share a story or two. In my case, I can share a bit of my own story. I have my own very similar moments. Both of my friends received a letter articulating what went off the rails, and I have a collection of such letters. I have my own letters, plural, that I received saying no, not yet. And so, and obviously I did make it through the ordination process with the help of others. And so I can't offer answers and solutions, but I can listen, I can offer a story with people who are struggling. Now, listening, that it is fairly obvious why that matters so much. When we make sure to listen to people, that's the way we form community, and we make sure that we're building a community that can help each other get through such moments. But stories, to think about such stories, why they matter so much, it's a different question. Why does the sharing and the hearing and the telling of stories matter so deeply? Speaking for myself, it's not that I expect either of these two friends to do exactly what I did, and because my story, I got it right. And it's not a matter of a blueprint. I'm not saying that we share stories as a way to here's the thing to do. It's more that stories are kind of a script, like for a play. And it's not, and when you think about actors working with a script, every actor is going to use a script in a different way, right? Every actor is going to use a script and bring that script to life. But the power of the script is to say, here are some of the moves that make sense on this stage. In this situation, the stage is the stage of disappointment, so to speak. And so this idea of a script being what is useful, I often think of the Bible in such a manner. I've said that the Bible is the record of God and God's people, the story of God and God's people. It's written by God's people, and so which has some it's very interesting issues that causes. But another, I think, very interesting way to look at the Bible is as a set of scripts, right? If you're facing a church meeting or any type of meeting, because there's a struggle about how far to bend in accepting people who are different, you could look at Acts 15. Not that you do exactly what Acts 15 lays out, but as a script, you could that's pretty good, right? You couldn't do much better than that, right? Many worse ways to handle conflict. Trying to figure out how to be flexible, how to handle differences amongst people, and how far do I flex? I mean, Acts 10, you can look at that script there as Peter is grappling with that same question. Wondering what is needed. If you're going to go out and serve, what's that look like? Well, there's a script for that in the Bible. The script is in Luke 9. Jesus sends out the disciples 2 by 2, and he tells them, don't bring any stuff. You are the equipment, right? And that's a good script. That's a good way to approach service to others. It's not about any particular tool or resource you bring. The first way to serve others is you bring yourself. You are the equipment. You are the tool. You are the gift, right? And this is true of many other places. You want to just time and again, reading through the Bible can be read as a set of scripts about how to handle situations. To be clear, a script is just a start. The actor, as I said, still has to perform that script, bring those words to life, and every person is going to do them differently. But you want to look at how to handle anger, look at Jesus throwing over the tables at the temple. You want to know how to the script for handling fear. How often do the angels tell the people that they visit, do not be afraid? Joy, the script for joy is in the Psalms. Read the Psalms. Jealousy, right? It's in this moment in Mark 9 when disciples see other people healing in Jesus' name and they're jealous. And how does Jesus respond to that? So if the Bible's a set of scripts, in a sense, what about grief and failure? Grief and failure is a particularly challenging situation that no one ever wants to experience. But there is a moment in Scripture that is a script, a way to think through handling that. It's the book of Lamentations, 5 chapters. It's just a very short book. But we're going to take this Sunday, next Sunday, to take a look at this. We're going to take a look at the first 3 chapters today, and then the 4th and 5th chapter next Sunday. And I'd recommend go take a read, go take a look at it. Maybe as you read it, doesn't fit this moment. I hope it doesn't fit this moment. I hope you're not in the middle of grieving or that type of situation. But one day it might. And it would be very good to know where this is, to know where the script is, and have some familiarity with it. And so we're going to get into that. And to get into that, we got to take a moment to understand what's happened. Why is the book of Lamentations written? Why does it exist? What has happened is that people are grieving after the 12 Hebrew tribes have arrived in the promised land. They'd formed the kingdom of Israel. Right? They have split. The northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes, and the southern 2 tribes have formed the kingdom of Judah. And the 10 northern tribes forming the kingdom of Israel had fallen in 721 BC to invasion from the from the empire of Assyria. The Assyrian Empire has invaded. And the southern kingdom continued. Judah, the 2 tribes of Judah, have continued on for quite a while, but eventually they fall in the same way, and they fall in 586 BC. And so 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire invades Judah, and anyone who was educated, anyone who had managerial experience, anyone who is in leadership, anyone that was going to be of any use to the Babylonian Empire is exiled. And so Lamentations is written by the people who are left behind. They are left behind, and they are in their kingdom that is no longer a kingdom. It has been conquered, and all of the people, they're walking down empty streets that used to be full and bustling. And so there's a grieving here. There's a struggling with suffering that is caused by their own actions. They understand that. They had walked away from God, and it came to this. And so today we're looking at the first 3 chapters as they respond to this situation. And these 3 chapters are very clearly 3 individual chapters because each chapter is a poem. And it doesn't show up in English, but it is very clear in Hebrew. The first line of each paragraph begins with the next letter of the alphabet. If you ever see like people's names and like they take the name and then every letter is the start of another adjective, it's that same sort of logic. This poem, the start of every next paragraph, next piece of the poem is written with the next letter of the alphabet. So chapter 1 is one poem, chapter 2 is a second poem, chapter 3 is a third poem, very, very clearly. Okay. Lamentations 1. How lonely sits the city that once was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she that was great among the nations. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has no one to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile with suffering and hard servitude. She lives now among the nations and finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. As we start reading this first chapter of Lamentations, it is oddly monotonous. I think that reflects the nature of grief. It sits there. It doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of is. And we read chapter 1, verse 5. Her foes have become the masters. Her enemies prosper. Because the Lord has made her suffer for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone away captives before the foe. In these first verses, it names why this has happened. They suffer for the multitude of their transgressions. There's no wiggling out of it here that happens. There's no attempting to rationalize. They're clear. We're suffering, we're grieving, and we are the ones to blame. Continues in verse 14. My transgressions were bound into a yoke. By his hand they were fastened together. They weigh on my neck, sapping my strength. The Lord handed me over to those whom I cannot withstand. For these things I weep. My eyes flow with tears, for the Comforter is far from me, one to revive my courage. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. And so late in this first chapter, there's actually a shift. There is a shift that happens. It moves from the third person, talking about she weeps bitterly in the night, talking about the city, Jerusalem. It shifts from the third person to the first person. My transgressions are bound around my neck as a weight, right? And so, there's a move there, sort of understanding of who is at fault. Not in the abstract. I'm the one who bears these weights. Your prophets have seen for you false and deceptive visions. They have not exposed your iniquity to restore your fortunes, but have seen oracles for you that are false and misleading. Right? And so, again, naming what happened. Without iniquity being exposed, it couldn't be resolved. And they had supported prophets who had whitewashed. If this is a script, the first two chapters of the script of Lamentations make something very clear, that blaming others is not part of the script of handling grief well. Getting very honest about our own shortcomings is essential. And this is a challenge. It is very tempting in the midst of pain or frustration or suffering to lash out and to blame another. And here we see it differently. It is my transgressions that are bound around my neck as a weight. That's true. Right? That's getting at how we handle such a situation. The third chapter then moves from what happened, that it is my sin that has caused this, and that this is what's happening, right? The third chapter moves from what has happened to what is next. And it is amazingly carefully worded. If you think about how in our culture, when it comes to, if someone wants to communicate very clearly, they kind of lean in, they might get their hand up a bit, and if they slow down and pick every single word, like that communicates, I need you to pay attention to every single, like it's not just the words that are that communicate at that point, it's the way they're presented, right? I want you to pay attention, right? And so in the Hebrew here, something similar happens. I told you that these, the first, second, and third chapters are each an individual poem, and each chunk, each paragraph starts with the next letter of the alphabet. In the third chapter, it sort of goes up to the next level of challenge and poetry. It's not just the first, it's not just the first word of the next paragraph of the poem. It's every single line. And so you have 3 lines that start with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Then you have 3 more lines. Each line starts with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And then it's drawing your eye to the fact that these words are chosen very carefully to make sure that you just lock in and hear the punchline of this moment. All right? So, okay, well, what's the punchline? What is the author of Lamentations making very sure that we pay attention to? Lamentations 3. I am one who has seen affliction under the rod of God's wrath. He has driven and brought me into the darkness without any light. My soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. So again, describing what this grief is. Verse 22. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. You've heard those words before, I'm guessing. Great is thy faithfulness. That is the hope that the author of Lamentations, the representation of the grief of these people who are struggling in such this moment, right? That is their hope. Great is thy faithfulness. Verse 24. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for one to bear the yoke in youth, to sit alone in silence when the Lord has imposed it, to put one's mouth to the dust, because there may yet be hope, to give one's cheek to the smiter and be filled with insults. For the Lord will not reject forever. Although he causes grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love, for he does not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. So if the first part of the script of Lamentations is to get real honest about one's suffering and why it happened, the next part of the script is to make it clear that there is hope, and that this hope is rooted and based in the character of who God is, God whose faithfulness is great. Great is thy faithfulness, right? The hope is not in ourselves. The hope is not just in us gutting through it. The hope is that God is good to those who wait, whose soul seeks him. I hope that none of us ever need this book, the script of Lamentations, the script for failure and grief to guide us into what we need, which starts, as I said, with confession of our part in it, and then a hope rooted in who God is. I appreciate the way that Lamentations does not gloss over and avoid what's broken. It does not gloss over anything. It is almost raw. The pain is almost palpable. But you go through it, and you go through it, and you go through it until you can join in saying, great is thy faithfulness. And I'd suggest that this might be something to bear in mind whenever we come to this hymn, because to sing, great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father, there is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. That is not a sentence, great is thy faithfulness. That is not written in the times when things are easy. It is written when times are hard and we need to hear that summer and winter and springtime and harvest, in all times of year, right? Sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature and manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love, which is what we need to hold on to in the midst of the changing times when things have gone off the rails. That we have pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Can you hear the logic of Lamentations right there? Strength for today, bright hope for tomorrow. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning new mercies I see. All I have needed thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Even in the midst of grief, even in the midst of struggling, that is our hope. Thanks be to God. Amen.